Okay, let's get started on Station 7. Station 7 is called Beginnings of a Nation. So this is after the American Revolution. This is when the country was first getting started. So first getting started with its own government. Keywords: Articles of Confederation, Constitutional Convention, Three-Fifths Compromise, Federalists and Anti-Federalists, and James Madison. That's a lot. Alright, so let's get started here. Articles of Confederation, what you need to know about that is that Articles of Confederation are the first attempt at a government. They didn't work out very well because they weren't very powerful and they didn't give the government enough power to really enforce the rules. So Articles of Confederation weren't very good. But the reason why the Articles of Confederation are important is because the Articles of Confederation, they kind of lay the groundwork for the Constitution. They set up for the government that we're going to have in the future. So, Articles of Confederation are important because it was kind of a rough draft for America. A rough draft for the Constitution. Okay? So, people didn't like the Articles of Confederation. They got thrown away after a few years. But it's okay because it led to something better. Okay. In 1787, they call this thing called a Constitutional Convention. Constitutional Convention is when all these guys, all these famous guys, okay, they all sat down. These guys are standing up, but they all got together and basically they had to design a new constitution. So the reason why it was called was because they had to scrap or get rid of the Articles of Confederation. They were trying. Some people just wanted to make the articles better. Other people just wanted to completely get rid of it. And that's what happened at the Constitutional Convention, is that they actually just completely get rid of the Articles of Confederation, and they start a brand new document. Okay, so they're in this Philadelphia courthouse. It's really hot. It's the middle of July. They don't have AC. Okay, they try to crack windows, and it's also a very secret meeting. People aren't allowed to write down anything at the meeting unless it's the literal Constitution. Okay. Luckily, we know what happened inside this meeting because of James Madison. If you remember, James Madison could recall everything that everybody said just based off of memory because he was extremely intelligent. Okay. But interestingly enough, they scrapped the Constitution. Now, after they get done with the Constitution, they have some problems with this thing called slavery, okay? And the reason why they have problems with slavery is because they don't know how to count slaves. Now, they don't count them as full people, because the North said that you can't count a slave as a full person. They said that because they didn't want the South to have too much power, okay? And in our system, the more people that your state has, the more power your state has. So the North thought that it's not fair for the South to be able to import slaves and count them towards their population, okay? Or how many people they have. The North didn't think that was fair. So the North said, if you are going to treat a slave as 3/5 of a person, or if you're not going to treat a slave as a person, you cannot count them as a full person. So if you see this right here, is a good visual. So for every 5 slaves, okay, they count them as 3 white people. Okay, now it seemed extremely racist, but the people who are anti-slavery were actually the ones who drove this forward, because they didn't want the South to be able to go to Africa and buy representation, okay? So they didn't want the South to be able to have a bunch of slaves that gave them more power, okay? So the Three-Fifths Compromise is when they would count every 5 slaves as 3 regular citizens. At that time, white people, okay? Alright. So, along with this whole Constitutional Convention and Three-Fifths Compromise, they created the first 10 amendments, which are called the Bill of Rights, okay? The Bill of Rights are extremely important because they list all of our individual freedoms, like our freedom of speech, our freedom of assembly, our right to bear arms. Okay, all of these things are very important to Americans. Okay, the first 10 amendments. Who essentially created the Bill of Rights? That would be James Madison. James Madison understood that people needed freedom, so he was one of the people who essentially created the Bill of Rights. Okay, now after the Constitution's made, there are two different camps of people. Okay, there are Federalists and Anti-Federalists. And for your question, you're supposed to list the differences between Federalists and Anti-Federalists. These are sufficient answers to get. Okay, I'll give you some time to write these down. The difference between Federalists and Anti-Federalists is that the Federalists felt that the government needed to be strong, and that their system of checks and balances between the three branches, executive, judicial, and judiciary, and legislative, they thought that these branches would balance each other and no one branch would ever become too powerful. So they said that this government would work out okay. The Anti-Federalists thought that the president would become just like a king again. They thought that we would have the same government that we used to have under the British with a king. They were afraid of that, and they also thought that Congress had too much power and that they didn't truly represent what the people wanted. So the Federalists thought everything was fine with the new government. The Anti-Federalists were against the Constitution, and they thought that the government had way too much power. Okay, so this Federalist Anti-Federalist is a big debate. So I'm going to give you a few more seconds to copy this down real quick. You can always press pause on the video if you need to. Okay, so that's that. So make sure you go down to here, you go down to the end at the description, and you can watch a nice video to sum all this up.